Right. Thanks, Azim. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the grand finals of Endo 2023. My name is Muhammad Zazwan bin Daud, and I'll be the chair for the grand finals today. Let's first have a round of introduction for all the judges. We can do it alphabetically according to the draw. Alicia, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. Hi everyone, I'm Alicia, pronouns she, her, but do refer to the panel as a whole. Good luck.
Hi everyone, I'm Amirul Shaki. I pronounce he, him. Good luck to all teams.
Hi everyone, my name is Dominic Stalemakers. Good luck to everyone.
Hi, I'm Nitas, no preferred pronouns. Good luck to everyone, and congratulations for being in the finals.
Hi,
Hi,
Farhan. Oh, my bad. You.
sorry. Hi, my name is Reggie. Congrats for making it this far. One of the panelists. Good luck.
Hi, Farhan. All the best.
All right. Since Azim already did a roll call for the points, there's a few ground rules then for the grand finals, especially the observers. Please mute yourself. It will also be appreciated if you don't abuse the chat. Yeah, just like I did just now. Yeah, don't use the chat while the debate is ongoing. The speakers might want to use it to ask for POIs, etc. So if you want to clap or anything, just clap in front of your computer and don't disrupt the speakers. Then next is for the speakers, please time yourself. I'll also be timing, but I won't be posting timestamps in the chat. So it's best for you to time yourself and also the speakers who are speaking so that you know when to and when to not give a POI. And then lastly, before you start your speech, you may introduce your preferred gender pronouns as well as your preferred method of getting a POI, either through chat, waving at the camera, or verbally, anything like. Yeah, so I think that is all. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start the debate. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Religion is something that's meant to give people hope and have faith in their future, knowing that God is in control. Leaving the fate to the hands of individuals is totally wrong. A few points of framing before I begin my two arguments. First of all, then, what is a world where religions preach the outcomes in your life are predetermined? First of all, we think people find more comfort that whatever happens may be out of your control. Second, people are more accepting of the events that happen in your life. And third, decision-making becomes less stressful for them. Secondly, then, what does the world on opposition look like? It makes you feel stressed in all aspects of life, leaving you to make less rational decisions because you feel like you are the only person that can control your life. And second of all, it places hard pressure on you. Note that this debate only applies to people who actually follow a religion because that is who religion calls out to. So what is the burden we set on OG? Whichever house proves that the quality of life of people will be better on their side takes this debate, as the core of religion is people that follow it. On to my first argument then, on the comfort and meaning in their life. First part of this argument is on general society. I think when people know that a divine being has control over their life and is walking them along the pathway to whatever outcome God may have chosen for them, it means that they are likely to have more hope in their future, knowing that their future is in God's hands. So instead of trying to single-handedly shape your future, you know that you have faith in a divine being that is watching over you and your life. I think what's fundamental here then is to understand what people actually see in religion and why people believe in it in the first place. I think the value that religion brings, like moral values and rights and wrongs that people have to follow, is just a basic guideline, right? But people that follow religion and believe in religion tend to also want reassurance from God. And I think the best reassurance you can get is that the outcomes are determined by God. And so because you trust God and you believe in God, you can trust that your life and outcomes of your life are going to be good. Then, what does it look like for this average individual? Some people may find comfort in the meaning and the idea that there is a higher power and a divine plan guiding their lives. Believing that the outcomes are predetermined can offer a sense of purpose and assurance, especially during difficult times. Like when you don't get a promotion that you were hoping for, or like when you're building your own business but then it fails. All these hard times are when you try even harder to get back up because you don't want to disappoint God and you don't want to stop walking on the path that God already made for you. I think this also means that you accept your faith in life. Embracing predestination can lead to acceptance of life's circumstances, whether it be positive or negative, right? When individuals believe that outcomes are already predetermined, they may find it easier to accept the frustrations, the ups and downs of life as a part of a greater plan than reducing the feelings of frustration or resentment to their own life. Second part of this argument then is going to be focusing on minorities. I'm going to focus on why this particularly benefits minorities. I think it's fair to say that minorities probably face the most hardships in society rather than an average individual, right? Because just the pure fact that they're already oppressed, they're stigmatized, and they aren't valued as much in society. So they always feel put down, they always feel left out, they have less opportunities than everyone else, and they just find it harder to get by in society. What this would do to a minority individual that believes their fate is in their own hands is that it would make them feel even more discouraged or feel even more self-hatred towards themselves if something does go wrong in their life. Like when they're facing hardships, when their boss like gets really mad at them for like a tiny thing, or when they're being oppressed, it makes them feel self-hatred to themselves because it makes them think that they were the ones that caused themselves this suffering. Then I don't think it's fair for them to feel even more hatred and less faith in their future. Therefore, the belief that God has had it all planned out for you and everything will work out as long as you work hard, believe in yourself, and persevere is something that is going to get these minorities moving and going to get these minorities especially more hopeful in their future instead of immediately giving up and immediately resulting to the worst outcomes. This argument is then debate winning because first we went on the metric of vulnerability because we help the most vulnerable people and we give them more hope in their future and we let them carry on with their life even if there are some hardships. Secondly, then we went on the metric of scale because we think that we benefit the general society because we're able to help more people fulfill their dreams and fulfill their life better. Second argument then on why mental health is better on our side of the house. Here I'm going to tell you why people are going to feel better and will feel less pressure to make decisions as they think their fate is already set out for them. We think that when you tell people that every choice you make is going to influence your outcomes, it makes them very wary of making every single tiny decision. It makes them feel like they've made the wrong choice per se, and it's not turning out well for them. It makes them feel guilty and makes them hate themselves for making that choice. That's terrible because the core of religion is giving people hope, making people feel purposeful. What the op bench is doing is going exactly against the values of religion. When you feel guilty of every single decision you make, when you literally hate yourself, or when you feel wary of making a specific decision, it means that you become too indecisive and lack the ability to make a rational decision. Rationality is something that's extremely important in this case in decision making, but when you feel guilty for past decisions, you won't be able to make rational decisions or think clearly. Why? Because rational decisions, no thank you, stem from weighing that might happen. But then you feel guilty for every decision. You start thinking about really, really nitty-gritty things about each decision. Then you feel this pressure. When you're under pressure, it is so much harder to make rational decisions because you're pressured to make the right one, but you don't know which one is the right one. On their side of the house, they have more people feeling self-hatred, leading to worse mental health. Even when small things go wrong in their life, like maybe they didn't get a big bonus that they expected, then you feel hatred and you don't feel that you feel like you did everything wrong when things often are out of your control. Now, panel, let me tell you here that off is going to probably go. People are going to just give up. They don't feel the motivation. They don't feel accountable. But let me tell you here, this is absolutely not true. This is preemptive, by the way. The narrative in society right now that people should try hard, people should feel motivation, people will follow these narratives regardless of religion. But what OO does is makes these standards worse. Individuals are forced to believe that what they choose inherently made their lives bad. I'm going to add a little bit of minority analysis here as well, because I want to tell you that a lot of things in society is out of your control as an individual. But on op, they're making it even worse, because they're making them believe that they did something wrong and their actions caused them to have a bad life. Even though a lot of things are out of control, like discrimination, bias, racism, and more. These focus on the vulnerable communities, and we tell you why they have it the worst, because you feel like you cause yourself all these harms and then you just hate yourself even more. So proud to be on OG.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for that great speech. I can invite the Leader of Opposition to open up the case for opening opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. POIs verbally pronounced the hearing. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. It was critical to note in this debate panel that nowhere in your life would you ever have an abstract idea of what your predetermined outcome was ever going to be. It was largely going to look like a manifested belief. That is, if you are born into a low socioeconomic family, you manifest the idea that I'm innately unable to escape my poverty because this is God's predestination for me. He birthed me into a poor family, hence my identity is me being a poor individual. Or you manifest it from your religious preacher or religious symbols in your life or around you. There's a lack of individual autonomy that exists on prop. It's dangerous and it's going to make them lose this debate. I think this is where OP actually makes that comparative. Because note how autonomy is just so much more present on our side of the house. It's a crucial piece of autonomy that allows you to individualize and allow you to internalize the choices in your life and allows you to determine how you want your life to shape. I think that's what's going to win us this debate. But two pieces of important factorization. Firstly, what does outcome influencing actually look like in a religious context? So I think it's going to have to look like things like teaching of religion and your outcome in the future of your life and your afterlife that is largely within your control. So the jobs that you get, the socioeconomic status that you end up in, or even the situations that you enter in your future and things like business and things like education in life, all direct consequences of the actions that you make. I think the reason as to why this is just so much more abjectly like manifestable and it's so much more comprehensible for the vast majority of people is because this parallels to a lot of how society already functions in status quo. That there's sort of a system in which you're rewarded for making the right choices and you're punished for making the wrong choices. I think people are able to internalize this and able to conceptualize this much better in comparative to proposition model, which largely looks more opaque and vague. Second piece of characterization, then what does predestination end up looking like? I think it's the idea that predestination is often linked to the idea of some kind of divine sovereignty. The idea that God has a predetermined plan for an individual's life, including their ultimate destiny and the damnation that they experience. This means that regardless of one's actions or choices, their life's course has already been set in motion by the divine will of God. But I think the crucial comparative here is then you don't actually have an abstract idea of what this ends up looking like. I think the only way you ever have a like comprehensible idea is insofar as you manifest these things. I think that is too vague of a scenario to be left to because people are born into so many various different situations. I think these can manifest in positive ways, they can manifest in negative ways. I think it doesn't work as a blanket solution for a religion of a billion people. So critical framing then on our burden, I think it's just to prove to you why we're uniquely able to guarantee a sense of fulfillment for individual beings. I think the metric should be about fulfillment, right? It's to prove to you that agency is the most important thing in this debate, and the ability for you to make a choice that is good or bad, and the fact that you're in control of your life is in fact a fulfilling piece of your personality, and it determines your outcome as an individual. I think that's what's critical here, right? But first argument then on the principle and the purpose of religion itself. So first layer, the historical purpose of religion and the obligation it holds towards society. And the purpose of religion is to influence how you behave rather than dictate your individual behavior. So a lot of these standards that are set by religion largely looks like encouraging people to behave in a certain way. That's to tell people that this is kind of the wrong, like stealing is wrong, murder is wrong, etc. From when the Bible was written, we've manifested it into things like our social, in our legal systems, so on and so forth. I think then the obligation religions have to people is so much more crucial here. because you have to recognize how people then have limited agency when it comes to what religion they are born into. You leave it up to religion to shape your worldview and shape the way you act in life. So if you're a Hindu, you can't eat beef, you have to be vegetarian on certain days. I think this manifests in so many more other ways when you enter deeper into your religion. So recognize how religion holds such an abject control over your life. I think insofar as religion then convinces you that you don't have that control over your life, you're not able to actually experience individual things because God has predetermined everything for you. I think that's not the kind of autonomy that we want to be pushing. But second important layer then, how exactly does this manifest in status quo? I think the idea and the concept of personal responsibility forms the foundation of ethical and moral frameworks in societies, right? So the understanding that we are accountable for our own individual actions does things like encourage empathy, compassion, and instill that sense of justice in individuals. On the other hand, a belief in things like predetermination undermines the notion of accountability. You lead to things like a lack of responsibility for an individual person's actions. I think this could erode things like the moral fabric of society. You lead to a lack of responsibility, the erosion of whatever ethical frameworks we have in society right now that guides people to right and wrong. Because I'm uninclined to believe that's likely going to be parallel on proposition, largely by virtue of the fact that you now have a predestined abject ending. That is to say, no matter what you do in life, you're still going to end up in a similar scenario. But note how then this is so much more dangerous when you're manifested in lower income communities or in minority communities, where perhaps you're born into a neighborhood where gangs are inherently prevalent. You end up manifesting it as sort of your abject purpose in life to be a part of that community that is a gang. I think then these things end up manifesting negatively in the long term. But crucially, in response to prop, it makes people more innately right. We don't actually think this is a bad thing, because ultimately that's what makes you think before you make a critical decision. That's to say, should I buy this house or buy this car, rather than enter a position of delusionality and buy the car and go, aha, God will pay off my loan, it is destination for me. Second argument then, on the unique ability for self-progression that exists on opposition only. Firstly, why does prop largely encourage complacency? Two reasons. One, the interpretation of the outcome is so subjective in and of itself. There's no physical way you can identify what your life is likely to look like. Again, I point out how dangerous this could be, because you could potentially be born in a rich family where you could be encouraged and your predestination could be, I become the business owner, I inherit my parents' business. But simultaneously, you could also be born into a poor family and you could end up having your predestination be working as someone in a factory. But before I move on, any points? Okay. Secondly, the idea of risking more not actually unhappy. If you're unhappy with status quo, I'm inclined to believe that people who are not like, yeah, I think I'm inclined to believe that if you're really uncontent with your life right now, you're unlikely to want to progress insofar as it's a predestination. So people no longer want to climb that social ladder that actually gets them out of whatever situation they're within. But secondly, on why this is just not a proposition. Firstly, is the idea you can individually change your outcome. There's a persistent push factor that exists. So in a comparative, let's say you're really poor and my life is really miserable, I still do everything I can to get rich or at least succeed and cross that barrier. At the end of the day, maybe I'm still poor, maybe I'm not incredibly successful, maybe I didn't live that happy life because I was entirely content with the idea that I was going to be living a poor life for the rest of my life, but at least it was much more fulfilling. I got myself out of some degree of physical suffering. I think that just makes you so much richer in the idea of your own personal fulfillment, because you were the arbiter of how your life ended. I think that's a sense of fulfillment in itself. I think secondarily, we prevent a lot of stagnation that exists. Let's say minorities wanting to manifest a lot of negative situations they are born into. But thirdly, crucially, the unique individual ability to find fulfillment and happiness in your life, that is about the macro things in life that bring you joy. So you pick a certain career choice, and certain career choice, you make a certain life decision. All of these things give you individual autonomy. They make you incredibly much more fulfilled, because all of these things make you choose and dedicate and dictate how your life ends, and it's not necessarily the hand of another person. I think a lot of these things give you so much more fulfillment. For all those reasons, side with you.
All right, I thank the leader of opposition for that speech. Now to continue Uji's case, I would like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
So I'll be taking a POI around 5:30. Just yeah, please don't guess. And POI is verbal. Two things I'm going to do in my speech here, Judge. First, I'll be giving rebuttals to some of the opening opposition team, and then I'll be providing you with a third argument on why it aligns with the values of religion. First, let's give some rebuttal to opening op. The first thing they told us was this principle about the purpose of religion in itself. So they say that religion gives you limited agency. Look, Religion never tells you to join gangs or something like that. If it's true religion is to influence how you behave, there are many different segments of religion. Religion proves different narratives in different parts and segments of religion. So by telling you that your life is predetermined, they also still tell you and still influence your choice in different ways. I'm also going to run a principle in this debate and tell you why we align with the values of religion, more weighing on these principles when I run our principle. So that's what gave us this argument on how we create complacencies. So this is basically that when you're poor, you stay poor because you think God chose that for you. So I think the difference here is they think that people will just stay where they are and will not actually try to be motivated to change or to change their life. But I think that people always think that God created the right life for them and will create a good life for them because they believe in God. They believe that God creates this kind of stability to their life. So when you're poor, they'll think that God will create a good life and create a happy life for them. And they would want to continue on this life to fulfill what God told them. So basically, when you're poor, you won't believe that just God just told you to stay poor. You'd rather believe that God actually created the right choice, a stable life for you, and you're going to get there by following God's path. So I don't think this is really true, that really when you stay poor, you stay poor, because I think religion pushes different narratives, and that is what opposition is missing in this debate today. So now, let me provide you with a third argument on why it aligns with the values of religion. First thing to analyze here, what are the values of religion that every religion agrees on? 3 main values. First, it gives people hope and purpose. Second, it gives people community. And third, it gives people reassurance from a higher being. So what does thinking fate is in your hands do to people? It gives people a false sense of agency. Notice this kind of clashes with op. Because actually, after the long run, it is going to feel too overwhelming because you as a tiny individual has to control this big thing called life. Having people believe that every action they make will determine their outcome in life is going to make them feel less hopeful. And after a few ups and downs, they're just going to give up altogether. What OO tells us is that people need agency and they need to have choice and know what is going to happen in the future. But I think what is so important to note here is that the agency you get over your life is still there on our side of the house. You still are able to choose what you want to do. You're still able to follow your dreams. You're still able to make many choices in your life, even when your outcomes are already predetermined by God. What this means is that all the stuff LO talks about with agency and choice still happens on our side, but it's not like you can directly talk to God anyways. But the difference is that on our side, you have more faith in yourself because you know that if you fall, God will catch you, or if you sidetrack, God will put you back on the right path. So what they're doing on their side is making you control this big thing called life, which really is creating a false sense of agency. We think people will still make choices on our side. It's not like they won't make any choices at all. They'll still make choices. But if they make a wrong choice, they'll think that God will make you and put you back on the right path. So even if you're poor, for example, let's deal with their example here. Even if you're poor, for example, and you feel that, that God has put you on the wrong path, you're still going to have choices and you're still going to make choices to try to bring it right back. You're going to think God created a life for you and you're going to want to follow that path. The values of religion are important to individuals that believe in religion just because they want to please God. All that LO talks about sounds very, very fancy, but the choices you make on our side of the house generally become better because you don't overthink your decision. You don't irrationally make decisions. Don't get me wrong, overthinking may be good in some instances, but in this case, what it does is it causes worse mental health, it causes mental burnout, it makes people more likely to give up because they're too tired of controlling their own life. So don't believe OO when they tell you they give agency, because honestly, they don't give anything but stress. So here, let's go back to the values of religion and tell you why all of this big chunk of analysis I gave lines up with that. So first, let's talk about giving people hope and purpose. I think this is fairly straightforward. We give people more purpose because they believe that God is giving them the purpose in life, and so they're likely to follow this purpose. Second, let's focus on community. They think that God will create a good circle for them. They think that God will create them and put them back on the right track. It gives them reassurance from a higher being. And that is what the values of religion are, and that is what really happens. Before I move on, let me have a POI, preferably from closing.
I'm a suffering poor person. Won't my predetermined outcome place me in misery? Because the divine being that I believed in believed that I needed to suffer and that suffering was unchangeable.
No, the thing is that it's not that a divine being say that you're a sufferer, because the thing is religion always provides purpose and always provides hope. The entire basis of religion is to create a stable life, is to create purpose, is to create community. So from this, we see that people put their trust in religion, hoping to get a better life. That's why people go pray in like churches or temples, for example, when they're in a hard time, because they think God will sort it out for you. And that is what people believe, that God will make your life stable. So when you're in a bad place, they're likely to believe, rather than thinking, oh, God has put me in this place and I'm going to stay in this place, they're going to believe that God has provided me. This is just a small part of my life that God has claimed, that God has created for a bigger part in my life. So I will try to take that path and try to create my life and try to make my life be better, because God has created this path for me and God will make sure that my life will be stable. So we think really that they're not just going to stay poor because they're poor. They're going to think that it plays out in a bigger part of their life and God will likely sort this out for them. So now, why are we already better than all the other teams in this debate today? I don't think the opposition bench can extend anything on agency because we already co-opted this benefit. But any extensions coming from CO won't matter anyway because we weighed out all the possible benefits already. Our closing team isn't going to have better impacts than us because we already gave you practically all the angles in the space. 3 main angles we gave you. First, we focused on a principle on why this is inherently good. Second, we focused on minorities, which is a vulnerable community in this debate, and we told you why we benefit them and OP doesn't. And third, we tell you about general society and how they will believe and feel better in this debate. So our impacts are just much larger on 3 metrics. Metric of certainty, we know that it's better in the long, it's more certain. Second, we tell you metric of scale, it impacts a large amount of people and makes them feel more purposeful. And metric of sustainability, they feel in the long term, it'll get sorted out. So therefore, vote for OG.
Right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. Invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Give me a second. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. What is a life of happiness? Was it to wake up every morning feeling joy at the daily benefit of your circumstances? Was a child born into the palm of privilege, reminded of that fortune relative to the suffering of others daily? The answer was no. We were limited in only living our own lives, and soon enough, the joy we enjoyed from our predetermined outcome soon fizzled out. Because it was our reality, it was the outcome we woke up to every day. It was hard for it to keep being special. You may have been happy, yes, but that dopamine rush reduced every day till it fizzled out, leaving you accustomed to your environment and feeling purposeless in life, struggling with a reason to keep going. That's where OO came in, because our burden was never to prove you were happy or that you were sad. It was to prove, for the most part, that the fact you weren't where you wanted to be in life and could change that would drive people out of bed, living a life of purpose and fulfillment in that agency, whether or not the decision you made was bad or good, because it was a decision that you made, a condition far outweighing the shallow metrics of happiness and sadness. Let's debate a debate that went beyond just feelings and emotions. Let's debate a debate that went beyond the idea of people's actual livelihoods. 2 things that go completely unresponded to. Firstly, on the entire principle on the purpose of religion. Diffish makes it clear and it gives you historical analysis as to how religion was never meant to make you feel complacent. It was never meant to be something like a dogma that you followed. Rather, it was a guidebook to life. It was a guide that you could fall back on to help you influence your decisions and to add meaning and empowerment in those decisions. That is why religions like Hinduism or Buddhism preach a lack of materialism, which makes people far more open-minded and far more present in their daily lives. Religions like Islam, which, for example, originate from the conquest of the Middle Ages, are religions of honor, which preach people having dignity because that is the kind of life they want you to lead. It was never a life you were supposed to lead. It was the kind of dogma that would influence the decisions you made. That was completely unresponded to. I don't really think you operate on what religion really means. In the most extent, or in the greatest extent, you're practically out of this debate. But secondly, on the practical of a fulfilling over a complacent life, I don't really get the metric here, and I think it's clear that they don't understand the idea of fulfillment. Because all you get is this idea of how you're going to be more happy and less burnt out in our world. We told you time and time again that never mattered. It was never about feeling happy or sad. It was about actually feeling fulfilled. It was about actually attaching meaning to the decisions that you made. And that is why we age out. We were debating on completely different metrics, and I think the debate should follow those that we set out. First response then, to flip them out of this debate on the macro, as to how having no control of life makes you, for most often than not, depressed about its conditions. Listen to PM and DPM. Their case sounds great if you were born into a family of wealth of life or fortune and privilege, that is. However, for the most part, this was never the case. For the masses of people, they may not necessarily have been born into poverty, but they certainly weren't born into privilege. After this response, their best case was exclusively in the smallest minority of privileged people in the debate. Rather, most people were born into conditions they would love to change. From my intellectual capacity to the skills I wanted to learn to the future aspirations I aim for that may seem somewhat out of reach. You told them this was impossible. Your burden then was to prove that most people would feel actually happy by your own metrics and fulfilled in their perpetual, unchanging conditions. The answer was no. Look around you. Every single one of us is on a mission that drives us out of bed for a certain reason. Hell, I wouldn't be here if I genuinely didn't care about winning this debate. If there was no point in our dreams and hopes, what was the point in living? Even at best, where you live an ecstatic life, it was one that at best was boring and would over time become less fulfilling. But second, they argue that people believe in God because he apparently always had a good outcome for them. I flip this and I think that's far worse, because if you actually buy that like big guy up in the sky has like some level of a positive outcome for you, only to continue living your life of perpetual misery, I think that makes you feel far worse, because you lose hope, but you're supposed to have hope because that is the only thing you have. You drive people into almost a condition of insanity. Third thing then, which is really weird, is how people won't make any choices at all because God would put them on the right path. Sure, I think you do make minor choices, but fulfillment came from the bigger things and things that seem out of reach or things that seem relatively difficult and like unchanging in life. If life was predetermined, you simply went with it. Ergo, the comparative in our world would be someone going for their dream job over the predetermined career because it's something that would be passionate about. I think going for something that's relatively hard in of itself is a factor that pushes you forward. Next, on the first argument, then on the spillover effect as to how you entrench the vulnerable. Let's talk about social advocacy in the world of opposition. We live in a world of inequity and suffering, yet it is aided by those who care, those who believe they could make a change, things like activists. Judge, it was that purpose, that idea that things were going to get better every single day that made this world a better place and made the bleakest lives just a little bit brighter. How does this change on the world of thought, where the advocates are complacent? How does their religious approach actually affect their behavior then? First layer of analysis. The idea of fate, often, this is not just one of individual psyche, but one of collective society. For example, I don't just believe that my circumstance and occurrences or disparities in my life are out of my control. I believe social conditions that affect all others are the same way as well, meaning income equality was meant to be. Civil war in the developing world was meant to be. The suppression of religious minorities was just meant to be. Judge, picture this. Everything bad about the world remains simply as it was, because their world operates on the assumption that our predetermined fate, whether they be misery or joy, were unchangeable. In other words, you kill any ability of fueling positive social and political change. Every bad thing in the world likely remain at a standstill. Weighing that, I think the perpetual bad far outweigh the perpetual good. Is this really a world you want to live in? Before 6 points.
This is this house prefers motion. You can't say that religion is what happens on your side because it's a reimagined world.
No, that's simply untrue. Like, that's literally what this house prefers like motion is. Like, we get to redefine what it meant. But then on the net negative, on the failure of religion. First, this analysis alone wins over the debate on the practical level. The scale of harm of this argument arguably encompasses just about anything that CO could conjure up. If they argue the debate in a macro sense, they strengthen our material because it's about society at large. If they try to argue it in an individual sense, they rehash it because Divish very well explains this in a very macro sense. OO wins the op bench definitely. Recognize then that we back the opening principle class as well because we explicitly told you with real world parallels and historical context that religions were always meant to be exclusively a guide and a way of life for us to follow to uncover our own unique version of a fulfilling or meaningful life, whether that was one filled with lows or highs. This then exacerbated every principal harm Divish claim because to the billions of people who are born and prescribed a certain religion that shape their behavior, from the people around them to the kind of people they choose to believe or to be, you deny them with two key things. One, the ability to lead a meaningful life that we prove is a life premise on agency. They are far less likely to make the big decisions in your world, if at all. Secondly, the ability to explore avenues that would at the very least make their daily ventures purposeful. For example, I could change my circumstance and condition. I woke up every day to work towards my dream, whether or not I achieved it. That drive distracted me from life's miseries and gave me a reason to get out of bed. In simple, your religion by your own burden that enables life to be filled with meaning and complacency, which breeds fulfillment, achieves exactly the opposite. Judge, OG does not operate within the parameters of the debate, automatic thought. For O, on the other hand, I think it's an automatic first. Never prouder to oppose.
All right, I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now to open up the closing half of the debate, I'd like to invite the member of GOV here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. I went on my cam because my Wi-Fi is like unstable. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. CG's framing is going to be unique because all sides didn't analyze how people will view religion and view life overall. So moving on to framing that, what does this look like and how do you view life? We think that this can cater to things like, for example, underprivileged individuals or people who are basically just a part of society, people who didn't exactly live a good life. We think religion is what brings a sense of protection and solace as well as something you can depend on when you do ultimately fail. We think that individuals opt in for different reasons. OO can't just put a blanket characterization, and we think that individuals do pursue it for different reasons. OO needed to build another world because it was a first motion, which means they had to say how religion would change so significantly because this predetermined idea was already here for centuries and for so long. But for the different reasons is what was so crucial in this debate, where individuals from different backgrounds are able to get better aid on our side of the house. Gratification and fulfillment that OO wanted to talk about all comes out on our side as well, because now you view as God giving you a chance, because you associate your happy memories with religion, because now you think that there is someone looking out for you, that there's someone willing to give you that chance to live your life. You're able to have a lot more healthier and happier approach. So that has to do with this whole thing about how individuals won't be motivated on their side. Why would individuals still be motivated in CG? Because we think that this predetermined outcome doesn't help you force you to have no point in life. We think that rather there's things like, for example, the biological instinct to still do something to help yourself, right? We think that sometimes this supersedes religious ideologies. But irregardless, we think you still want to try and hope for better things in your life. Things like, for example, God giving you miracles and often other parts of religion to make individuals strive for better because they want to be seen as good for these predetermined choices. We think that overall, we still get this intrinsic enjoyment. You're able to view as like God being able to help you. We think you're eternally grateful for these things. All the rebuttals that I'm going to be talking about will be flagged out in my extensions later on. But very quickly, how do we differ from OG in this debate? We differ from OG because you don't talk about what this instills in people, but rather what this means to people and why having your faith not waver is a debate winning point. Every individual might and will probably fail somewhere in life. Up cannot just say that they're going to help them. We prioritize how they get themselves back out and opt into the most accessible aid and the most healthy avenue, which was religion. They can't think about what this would do to the individuals, but we emphasize how do we retain them in religion and allow them to stay in this community, which helps us to seek empowerment instead of going to other unhealthy forms of escapism. Finally, the difference on both sides is about how sure burnout would still exist and it's symmetrical. We think that the entire difference is about how you rob yourself of happiness and do decisions that often don't have a lot of good outcomes on the other side of the house. You make people leave religion on opposition, you waver their faith in these things. We think that they lose this debate. So moving on to extension then, the first extension I'll provide to you is religion was the most important avenue to fulfill the desire to live for certain individuals. On opposition, where you lose the most accessible avenue of aid. First layer, religion was the most accessible form of safety and happiness. What does religion mean to individuals? We think religion is often a safe community for individuals to feel guarded against. It allowed you to feel protected and connected to other individuals. When no one was there for you, your religion was there for you. They're the ones who are catering to you. If like religion was there for them, we think that they are able to seek some sort of motivation to still continue on with their life. Second layer then, why is this safeguard a way for individuals to sustain faith within this religion? We think this predetermined faith was what was the safety net and barrier to cushion the hardships in life. Because if bad things happen and it was good choices that supposedly lead to good outcomes on opposition, we think that on the other side of the house, they have to deal with people losing faith in religion because what they preach wasn't true. We think that it's likely that sometimes the good choices that you think you made are going to lead to bad outcomes. When that happens, you don't have people super guarding themselves against these things. You're rather rather them losing faith in religion because what they think was supposed to be a good outcome didn't really happen. If religion failed them on their side of the house, they aren't able to have a reason to live. You have no sort of reason to continue on in your life. We think that you're letting these people suffer on opposition due to systematic barriers that they're unable to break. This is why it's so harmful. Third layer then, how emotions that hold back your fulfillment in life often act as the cut-off character progression. We think that on our side of the house, when bad things happen and it was predetermined, people would believe that it was God's plan to help them further. So what would happen is that they would turn this hardship around into something that was educational and try to learn from this experience that they have been given. This was unique to CG because it provides you about how you're able to view this life and view religion as something that is able to help you. You're able to stay in this community. You're not going to like opt to other like unhealthy mechanisms. On our side of the house, people would still feel motivated, and even if their life didn't automatically go well, this wasn't important because what was important was that they didn't feel that their choices were the cause of their suffering. They didn't feel like upset over what they chose to do. Right, in the end, they don't beat themselves up over the choices that they made. This is what happens on up bench, right? The fourth layer then is that we think that these individuals who lived the lives where religion was the most important to them should stay in this community, because this is something we uniquely bring from CG about how we prevent backsliding into unhealthy coping mechanisms. Recognize that religion in of itself is a way of escapism, right? And often it's about to get these people to rationalize the problems that they either cause or face, because the other alternative that exists on opposition was things that are easily accessible as well, such as drugs, alcohol, and like smoking and tobacco, etc., stuff like that, right? Or even a lot more serious other like forms of escapism, like for example suicide, self-harm, and etc. These are the things that people resort to on their side of the house the moment they lose faith in religion because their good choices did not lead to good outcomes. We think that individuals inherently often need some ways to escape. It's not about availability, and recognize that this is a this house before world where since time this entire concept has been engaged, you just cause more substance abuse problems on their side of the house. We think that as like on CG about how religion was super important because this was what you needed to safeguard, this is what you needed to have a sort of empowerment under the side of closing government. Before I move on to my second extension, sure, POI. No? Okay, moving on then. Second extension, how this leads to the most important forms of empowerment. Then the first layer is about what do these actors look like in the first place. You think that there are several examples. It could be, for example, individuals who come from minority groups. You often feel like you're losing the birth lottery and how you can never escape the shackles that are tied to you. Or it could be individuals who have faced trauma. You have some problems that you hold in your life. You're unable to let go of these problems and you're stuck rethinking the choices that you made on the side of opposition. Or it could be just like normal individuals who are basically living a such mundane life where you're unable to go through any better because that is what you're born into. And then this is because other actors do exist within religion. It's just that outside uniquely debates on the basis of who needed it the most. You know, regardless, religion was the avenue that these people needed. We uniquely explained why staying in it is the best option. We differ from OG because we not only just cater to underprivileged individuals, but everyone as well. Second layer then about how it empowers these individuals for an astronomical level. Firstly, about how their life is in the control of a higher deity, which fuels the entire mindset that you are part of something bigger than yourself. You're able to break past systematic barriers and live a prosperous life. Because this is important form of engagement from outside, because unlike other sects, recognize what religion is individuals elevate towards like themselves, but about more higher and personal level, it's past six. Then finally on their side, we think this entire problem they propose is symmetric, because either instead of God, other factors such as systematic barriers and oppressors often limit your autonomy on opposition. We at least give actors a more holistic approach to life. We think that overall, the third area is about how people often won't dwell on these factors on opposition. We think that on your side of the house, you can't live a fulfilling life on like opposition, because the moment you do this is because people are constantly stuck in a cycle where they constantly worry about what they're doing and what choices they make. You make them feel that that decision or the next decision they make is going to have to be the downfall of your life, or it's going to give you bad outcomes. We think that they aren't able to enjoy happiness or live their life to the fullest because they're constantly thinking about the choices that they have to make they're so subjected to them. We think that on top of that, you're also rethinking the choices that you had made in the past. We think you're going to dwell on the past furthermore on the side of opposition because you think that all of these choices were harmful to you. So in conclusion, I believe that you should start with closing government because we provide like people the sense of fulfillment and empowerment, and never been harder to propose. Thank you.
All right, I thank the member of Gov for that speech. Now to invite the member of opposition. Here.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yep.
Okay. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think I've watched enough Instagram reels to know that if you are predispositioned to believe that you are a person that is blessed by God, you're obviously not going to be a very good person, right? A very simple speech here today then. Firstly, on some reframing, because we think that's what side opening optimist are on. Moving on to a few responses as to what the Gov bench as a whole has told you, and then moving on to our unique extension as to how you create the sense of elitism and the delegitimization of religion as a whole in the future, right? So a quick reframing, because what does religion actually look like? It looks like something that gives meaning to people, where you opt in because you find comfort in the fact that you can take advice from a higher power. That's why you like to follow these things. But also note the history here, because you've seen things like literal wars over religion. That is to say, things like the Christian Crusades that have already existed for hundreds of thousands of years, right? I think then it's a tension point within society, because people want to feel exclusive. There's predisposition bias that your God is right, because note the fact that you're likely going to be born into it. You're going to be exposed to it from an extremely young age, especially if you're born into a community or a country where this is the main religion. We tell you then in countries like Malaysia, where the population is predominantly Muslim, that you're going to believe that, like, you know, you're going to be very strongly rooted in your beliefs that yours is the only true God. I think then you're less likely on their side to opt into learning about other religions, because you have no incentive to, because you're inherently biased against those religions in status quo. I think secondly, on the comparative, because what our side offers is when you preach free choice, when you preach consequentialism, that your choices aren't predestined, that you're not destined for heaven or hell. I think we weigh out because of two things. A, the fact you're altruistic and become a better person as a whole, because you don't want to change your ways on their side, because you don't want to go to heaven or to hell, right? You know that it's already planned. I think that's much worse. Comparatively then, when you give meaning to these people, is when you give direction, when you tell them that you can change whether you're going to heaven or hell, and you stop them with this like this hopeless like pit that you thrust them into. I think secondly, is the fact that you get more followers because you don't turn away people. Because no, on Gov, you believe that you're led to a certain path. You see that one divine light has led for some guy to some religion. I think that means you're less likely to do things like advertise your own religion or preach tolerance for other things, insofar as you believe that yours is the only path that God actually advocates for. I think then you're much likely to antagonize people outside your own religion. And we see that in literally every religion in the world, because of, like, look at the wording of the motion, right? I'm going to extend on that later in my arguments. But I'm moving on to my responses then, as to mainly what they told you about how you accept life circumstance. Two responses here, because I think CG was like a complete rehash, right? Because note, it's extremely uncharitable to say you just roll over and accept your fate. Because you're not going to react to your father dying by thinking, oh, it's God fated, I can't do anything. That's not what you're going to think. More likely on their side, what you're more likely to see is going to be the self-internalization of something that they try to push onto us. You're not going to get hope, because you're going to wonder why God did this to you, because not everything has a silver lining. Insofar as you fail to identify what's the benefit here, you wonder why your God did this to you. That's the one in which you nitpick your life for mistakes, and you get things like the self-internalization of these negative emotions, because now you think you cause all this pain and suffering to yourself and to other people. On their side, then you force this emotional burden onto people that you shouldn't have ever felt. That's when you do things like you question your fate and your future, because you wonder if your God was a benevolent God after all. Because if my dog dies now, how is God gonna punish me in the future? That's how you don't draw any of the comfort they push on their side of the house. I think that's when you're more likely to opt into smoking or whatever CG tries to push, right? I think comparatively then, on our side, that's when you don't blame yourself, because you know actions have consequences, because you know you didn't contribute to your father dying from cancer when he died like in his sleep, right? I think that's when you don't question God, because you think that they're still benevolent. And that's when you more likely find yourself surrounding yourself in faith as a coping mechanism that you don't get on Gov's side. I think that what that means is you get less internalization of these negative emotions. It means that you believe that your God is still a benevolent figure that's watching you, because it's not your fault. I think that's when we co-op all the benefits or rational decision making or whatever they try and push. Secondly, on what they try, you try to make your life better because you know God is good, right? I think that's when you see less perseverance on their side as a whole, insofar as people are less likely to try again. Because if I try 3 times and I still fail, I'm just gonna believe that God has destined this for me. I should just not try again and again. I think it's when you're more likely to see people giving up on their first few goals. Before I move on to my argument, I'll take a POI preferably from opening. 3, 2, 1. Okay, moving on to my argument then about how on Gov's side, you create a sense of elitism and in the end, delegitimize religion as a whole. Because no deframing that you're likely to see yourself as being chosen by a supreme power. The harm is clear on their side, panel. It's the fact that your religious heads, like your priests, like your imams, etc., tell you that your God led you here to believe in this religion, and that was the only true interpretation in the first place. These are people who are perceived to be holy in the first place, and you're then likely to buy into whatever they preach you. 2 things then. A, the fact that you're likely to create religious echo chambers, because understand you're going to be born into these communities, or at least pockets of certain religions, insofar as people from those religions are likely to band together to stay near to each other. It looks like minority groups living in the same neighborhood in countries where they are like disenfranchised in the first place. I think the impact then is going to be these continuous discussions in these echo chambers about how your religion is likely to be better than everyone else because your God led you to this one thing, and how everyone else simply wasn't good enough because God didn't choose them to follow him or them, right? I think that's when you're less likely to do things like tolerate other religions, because you're going to be more inherently self-absorbed than anyone else. I think that's when religions get this kind of harm. And I want to talk about the second thing now, which is how you get more prejudice on their side of the house. So you're less likely to care about other people that hold different views to you, because everyone thinks that God chose your path. That's why you adopt the holier than thou mentality that you're going to see in everyone, because it wasn't just about one religion. This debate was about how different religions actually interacted with each other and how you saw them in the world. I think two things then. A, the fact that you're less likely to see changes in norms because you're less likely to adapt to modern norms. I think it's on their side where you see things like the lynching of African Americans in the lynching of African Americans not stopping because the people believe that you are holier than thou. I think that's when you see these Salem witch trials not being villainized because you revere your God, because you believe he led you here. I think it's when you cause more harm to minorities that didn't have a voice because they like to think you're better than them. I think B is the fact that you create the fragmentation of religion as a whole because people don't have the same ideals. That's when you see things like religious sects or are popping up. It's already tense in status quo when you see that like extremist Islamic groups making life harder for many Islamic people all around the world. I think the impacts are twofold. A, the fact that you like to see fragmentation and infighting because they like to see the escalation of existing tensions because now you don't give any incentive to compromise because God led you here. I think it's when you see the weakening of religious institutions and continuous turmoil that we've already seen in the past. It looks like worsening situations like, for example, the Taliban in Afghanistan, because now they have more incentive to believe that God was the one that led them here and that everyone else is wrong. And it's when you don't see the moulding that we've already seen from them. I think it's when you worsen international relations with countries like Malaysia and the US, because you have different religions, you have different beliefs, and it's much worse then. And secondly is the fact that they worsen social divisions on their side. So people believe that they're holier than thou. So you worsen things like Islamophobia on their side. You create more social division, and as a whole, what you do is you create much more divided world, and for all those reasons, CG takes its thank you. CO, my bad.
All right, I thank the member of opposition for that speech. And I can invite the government whip, Keshav.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
All right, cool. Just give me a second. Okay, I'll be going in 3, 2, 1. It was regrettable that opposition supported a world where individuals were not able to seek the escapism and empowerment they so desperately needed. But the clear flaw in the cases of both op sides was that why our model kept individuals within religious communities and why the alternatives were even more detrimental. I feel as though we got no engagement from their side of the house. And just going on to a few observations, OG debates on the ground of why religion acts as a safeguard for helping people get rid of past trauma and how this helps them get fulfillment on their side of the house. I understand that religion isn't the safeguard, but rather the roadmap that helps you navigate your life for individuals. The satisfaction and assurance gained from the fact that your life is just much more than what you were born into is what gives them the alleviation on our side of the house. OG needed to specify why religion acted as a model which helped people have more fulfillment, not just in their choices, but in the entirety of the existence, which is what Kate told you. But secondly, OG forgot to characterize the most important thing which is in this round, which is about how religion acted as the most proximate way for escapism for individuals and about what it meant for individuals. We uniquely told you about how it was important to the most vulnerable of society, but rather about how it was utilized to the fullest extent on our side of the house, and we were just able to have a way better holistic approach to religion. Going to middle brothers, they said you can't change what happens and why is it bad. We think comparatively it's better that opposition's world, because at least on our side of the house, when there is some sort of closure that you get whenever you're not able to actually succeed in life, and which you ultimately do fail. On their side of the house, you'll make them emotionally suffer because they identify the fact that they have self-autonomy and that the choices that existed weren't there, and that the choices that they made weren't able to help them. I feel as though it's even worse because they internalize all of these factors and they blame themselves. At least on our side of the house, people are held back by their trauma for the simple reason they feel as though it was part of a very bigger plan in life and that they should move on because God has planned more things for them. They look forward to other things because there is just more to their life and there's more room for like exploring life and stuff like that. But going on to CO, they talk about a few things about how there's elitism, how you try to delegitimize other religions, and finally about how religious echo chambers exist. Note the fact that religion's entire existence has always encompassed this. So no matter on which side of the house you are, on both sides it's there, on both sides it's there, because religions are highly competitive in nature. But their entire nuance about how you try and shame others is completely wrong, because it goes against religious interests. You want more people to adopt your sort of religion. You don't want to scrutinize other people's religion because that just literally counteracts the fact that you aren't going to be viewed as a religion which people can opt into. You're often viewed in a bad light. So all of the problems that they talk about, Islamophobia and things, are literally going to be against the incentive structures of what these religious institutions stand for in the first place. They're likely to not do so. I'll be integrating the rest of my responses into my clashes. First clash: on which side of the house do we let individuals have a stable integration within religion, and why is it important to have this? Recognize that opposition never dealt with the importance of saying why religion is important and how often mistakes in your life are internalized against deities and make you opt out of religion. This was a detrimental problem because a lot of healthy closure and a lot of rationalization of problems outside of your control can often be comprehended by individuals because it gives them the power to move on. Because if it was a predetermined path that God has placed for you, it just sheds more light on the incident and you're just able to have way more closure over the thing. But I feel as though all the harms that they highlight about how individuals do give up at the end are going to be existent on their side of the house, because recognize people who have tried the most in their life and have ultimately failed are going to accept the fact that their life is out of their control, because instead of God on their side of the house, it's oppressors and systemic barriers that make them feel as though their autonomy is infringed upon. And the fact that they were born into a minority and the fact that they were born into menial and middle class lives is often what they're going to die as. Instead of on their side of the house, I feel as though it gets worse. The simple fact that you internalize losing the birth lottery and the simple fact that you don't have any association with something greater than yourself is what makes the entire problem. At least on our side of the house, we're able to give people to avenues of rationalization of why these problems took place in the first place. But finally, about what uniquely happens on our side of the house. We told you that you don't dwell and blame your past choices, but it was better for our side of the house because your future choices also are going to not be influenced by this. I'll take you in a bit. But all of these things just lead to more self-doubt on their side of the house, where you're not able to have true fulfillment in life. So even regardless of religion, the base happiness that you get is often going to be infringed upon because you're constantly doubting the choices, or the simple fact that you feel as though there could have been better alternatives to take often put an imposter syndrome onto you, in which you feel as though you didn't actually you didn't actually want to go and control these things, and that you could have actually done something better. I feel as though it just takes away all the fulfillment that you get in life. At least on our side of the house, when you do do something good, you feel fulfillment from the gratification that you get from being chosen in the first place, and that there was something good done in your life. Opposition never actually told us about how individuals are going to stay within religion on their side of the house, even though Kate highlighted about why it was important, because it leads to further backsliding into unhealthy coping mechanisms, which I'll talk about later. Second clash, about why do we give a sense of higher empowerment for these individuals and how we have progression for the meaning of life for these individuals. I'll take you in a bit. Firstly, I think there's two parts here. Firstly, about fulfillment of choice. Secondly, about the empowerment of existence. On to the first part. I think on the opposition side, there are people who are stuck in a systemic cycle where they have to constantly be paranoid about what they're going to do and all the choices they're going to make. We already highlighted this, but I feel as though the entire problem is that a lot of the downfalls in their life and all of the bad outcomes are going to not just affect future decisions, but also are going to make them hinder the entirety of their existence. I think they aren't able to enjoy happiness or live the best lives because they're just going to likely want to do things which could have been better. They try and rationalize the fact that they could have made a better life. I'll take you.
Your case only works if most people are happy with their circumstance till they die. Because you argue they allocate that to whatever they're
I got your point. We'll talk about firstly, I'll talk about it later about how religion gives you fulfillment in life. And finally, on our side of the house, about the empowerment of existence. The negligence of CEO to deal with the fact that a lot of these individuals have constant self-doubt, and about a lot of these people try and internalize these problems is what's going to lose them the case. On our side of the house, a lot of the problems that exist are often basically going to make you feel as though you were part of something bigger in your life because you were part of a plan that alleviated you. You feel as though your association with a deity is what gives you importance in life. So all the problems that exist on their side of the house, losing the birth lottery, losing family members, you don't feel the burden because you feel as so you were part of something that was able to contribute to a much larger thing in life. Because at the end of a lot of these plans, it's often that you go to heaven, or often that you're able to have some sort of achievement. It was important that you don't blame yourself for what happened on people. Think about opposition. They're afraid to make choices, and all of these problems exist. But third clash, about how we prevent the comparative and about how we don't push people into horrible alternatives. Kate already highlighted about how there's a way more holistic approach to religion and about how on their side of the house, people are likely to have their faith waver because they internalize these problems against the deity that they're associated with. At least on our side of the house, we have a associative method and we have something that's proximate towards these individuals because their communities had it. So even on the best case, where you're born into elite families or you're born into menial families, at least it give you a sense of path because you going to church and going all of these things gives you intrinsic benefit of the fact that you were a part of something that's bigger. But honestly, when you don't have these things on their side of the house, you opt in into other proximate things that exist. So drugs and alcohol abuse are prevalent on their side of the house. We take this debate.
All right, I thank the government whip for the speech and to invite the last speaker of the debate, opposition whip. Here.
Okay, may I confirm that I'm both audible and visible?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. POI is 2 voice because I won't be checking chat. Hold on. Perfect. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. The moment you are born, you are destined for hell. But hey, your friend is destined to go to heaven because that's the plan that God set out for you. That's what God set out for you, right? You can never have eternal peace simply because you were born broken, and that's simply who you are. You deserve all the suffering that's going to be happening in your life, and that's exactly what government's case looks like, right? And I want to talk that's what government's case looks like, right? And I want to clarify that predetermination isn't simply just how your life pans out or the fact that your life is already mapped out, but it also determines where exactly you end up, like heaven or hell. And this is the type of ideology that a lot of people within these religions subscribe to, especially on government's end, right? Now, few call outs to the opening benches and to CG, right? Firstly, on opening gov. Notice that on opening gov's points, there's a big fallacy, right? Because I don't think that if life is predetermined, that feelings of regret, disappointment, and anger will go away. Like you're still gonna be feeling very frustrated with your situation right now, right? On their best case, right? That when they're suffering, they believe that things will get better, right? Three levels to this, right? Firstly, you're still likely going to hate your fate or whatever's happening to you a lot more, especially due to the fact that you cannot do anything, right? Simply due to the fact that you feel helpless and that your hands are in in God's hands, right? But you do not exactly know what exactly is gonna happen after you're suffering, right? But secondly, they see that there's no stress and you blame yourself less for all the bad things that are happening, right? A trade-off you have to make here then is that you have to believe that you are born broken and deserving of pain and loss, that you are destined for a life of discrimination, a life of poverty, etc., right? So you never opt for a better quality of life. But thirdly, we believe that you remain complacent and you say that, oh, God's gonna do it anyways, God's gonna get me out of this anyways, right? You're never able to have a better quality of life. But opening ops case, right? I believe their case really has no impact. All they say is that, oh, you have influence over your own life. You can decide what is right and what is wrong, right? I think this is just like low-hanging fruit and kind of obvious already, right? But they simply talk about the individual benefit, right? But this is exactly how we delineate, right? Because notice from Ethan's speech, how we expand is how we talk about how religions interact with each other and people outside religions, right? We talk about what happens when multiple religions preach this type of ideology and how they're constantly clashing with each other because all of them believes that they are the chosen one, that they're all destined for heaven, and they believe that their ideology is the right one, right? And this is something that OO was unable to bring in, right? But lastly, on CG, right? I believe CG is very derivative of their opening because both of them talk about comfort, mental health, but this is one of CG's strongest points. It's simply to point out that oh, you feel as if you're part of something bigger and you have association with something bigger than yourself, and that you won't blame yourself for whatever happens, right? I believe this is the exact reason, issue in this debate. Exactly. You won't blame yourself for whatever holy war or crusades are happening. You won't blame yourself for the people who your religion has been prosecuting, right? You won't blame yourself for these religious conflicts. You never question whether or not what you are doing is right or wrong. That is the main issue in this debate, right? Now, that is the main issue in this debate, right? Now, before I move on to my wing, fine, go save your case. Do you want to?
The narrative that exists in society already is that people should try hard and should get a good life. The only difference between our side and your side is the fact that you are by yourself on your side, and our side, God is with you the whole way.
I think God is with us either way. This is literally a religion. Just because you're saying it's not predetermined anymore doesn't mean that God magically disappears from the religion. You wouldn't have a religion in the first place. That POI didn't make sense. Okay, now how am I going to weigh this debate? I'm going to talk about how exactly the manifestation of predetermination influences you, the way you act, the way you perceive yourself, and how you interact with others and people part of other religions, right? Let's go to OG. Again, what do they tell us? They tell us people are irrational. They can't handle life. They can't handle decision making. How exactly are you supposed to wake up every day and make decisions like what you're going to eat for breakfast or where you're going to go today, right? I believe this is completely false. We all wake up every day and make choices. We're all able to hold ourselves up, right? We're all able to hold ourselves up, right? And you have to note that this is still just a narrative, right? Because just because you believe in predetermination doesn't make it true or doesn't mean everyone else is going to believe in it, right? What this means is that your choices will still matter. It will still have an impact. The only issue here is that you do not blame yourself for what the effect you do on others. You do not try to make yourself better. The moment in time you do make a mistake, right? You never question your choices. You never change your ways. You become complacent, right? But an OO, what exactly does OO tell you, right? They tell you that people will hate their lives. They're going to lose hope, right? And we believe it's very individualistic. And the only thing they talk about when talking about general society is that, oh, civil wars were meant to happen. And that's where their analysis stops, right? We see an extension that these religions will be very hostile toward each other, especially when multiple religions opt into this, right? We already talked about how you'll believe you're the chosen one, that you were destined for heaven, everyone else was destined for hell. And what Ethan mentioned was that echo chambers become echo chambers happen, right? And you're able to you delegitimize religion because now you delegitimize religion because a lot of people now will see it as very aggressive. This is why Islamophobia happens in the first place, right? Because this is why that happens in the first place, right? On the comparative, what we explain is that you become actually more altruistic and kinder to each other. Because the thing is, your fate isn't set in stone. Where you're going to end up, whether heaven or hell, isn't set in stone. There's a possibility you can still end up in hell if you act like a bad person, right? And all CG can say about this, a huge chunk of Ethan's case, it's just that, oh, this conflict doesn't happen anyways. Well, open your eyes. Crusades have happened. Holy wars have happened. I don't understand how you can say that this doesn't happen anyways when it is literally status quo, right? But lastly on CG, again, for responses to CG, right? Their entire case on how, oh, you can get to be part of something bigger, right? Now, what the part of something bigger, right? Exactly. What this leads to are four main things. Firstly, people feel as if they're entitled to be the judge on earth because they are the quote-unquote chosen one, right? They can be as prejudicial as they can. They can ostracize a huge part of people, and they don't engage with people outside their religion, right? They become very closed off and create this echo chambers, right? That's what happens when people feel as if they are the chosen ones, they are predetermined for heaven. But secondly, what Ethan mentioned is that there are a lot of extremist cases that happen in status quo, right? This is exactly why holy wars happen or religious conflicts happen, because religions are constantly fighting for who exactly is the chosen one, which exactly is the more legitimate religion, right? But thirdly, we believe religious infighting actually happens as well. For example, Protestants versus Catholics versus Calvinists, right? They all believe in the same God, but each of them believe that their interpretation is the right one. Each of them believe that they are the chosen ones. Everyone else is not the chosen one, right? So you can see a lot of conflict will happen and does happen in status quo simply because people feel as if they are predetermined for heaven and feel as if everyone outside the religion is predetermined for hell, right? This is something CG doesn't engage with. This is something our opening bench was unable to tackle throughout their entire speech, which is why we believe that CO ultimately takes this debate.
Right, I thank the opposition whip for that speech, and that marks the end of the grand final of Endo 2023. Thank you to all the speakers. For the judges, can all come open breakout room so that judges can go to a room to deliberate. Yeah, so that is all.
Thank you for the debate.
Yeah, thanks for the debate, everyone.
Thanks for the debate.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.